Ghosts and Goblins is a classic game series known for its brutal difficulty. Anyone discussing the most difficult games in the Nintendo Entertainment System or the Super Nintendo is definitely going to mention a Ghosts and Goblins game, and for good reason. Unfortunately though, the Ghosts and Goblins series hasn't had a proper entry since 2006, just 2 phone games that control really awkwardly and don't really scratch the same itch. Luckily for fans of Ghosts and Goblins, Spanish developer Juan Antonio Becerra created the game Maldita Castille, which is an homage to arcade games from the 80s, but especially Ghosts and Goblins. The game was released as freeware in 2012. With the help of Applelight Studios, the developer was able to create an enhanced and extended edition of the game for Steam, Xbox One, and PlayStation 4. This new version released in 2016 under the title Cursed Castille or Maldita Castille EX. Like Ghosts and Goblins, Cursed Castille has a pretty straightforward plot. The kingdom of Castille has been beset with evil monsters. In response, the king has summoned you, Don Romero, and his other knights to put an end to the nightmare. Cursed Castille plays exactly how you would expect a side-scrolling action game to play, but the game also has plenty of variety. Each of the 8 stages has a new look, and every section within a stage presents a new challenge. You may be in a cave where your only source of light is provided by this little creature holding a lantern, or you might be on a moving stagecoach fending off flying enemies. You could also be forced to traverse a swamp while jumping on the heads of turtles and avoiding hazards or falling into the water. This variety also carries into the 19 different bosses you encounter as well. Cursed Castille is also brutally difficult, just like Ghosts and Goblins, and you can only take 3 hits before you die, and there are minimal health items to find throughout the stages. But there are a few quality of life improvements that Ghosts and Goblins never had, and it makes the game a lot less frustrating than that series. For example, in Cursed Castille the base weapon is a sword, which you can only throw 2 of at a time. You can switch it out with a new weapon that you find hidden in a container. Now in Ghosts and Goblins, this meant you were stuck with whatever weapon popped out of that container, even if it was something terrible like the torch, which made it difficult to survive. In Cursed Castille though, the weapon power will pop out instead. It can watch as it cycles through all the weapons until it gets the one you actually want to use. It's a very convenient and nice feature in a game where certain weapons are much better than others at dealing with different situations, and it's a lot better than relying on random chance. The second quality of life improvement the game has is its save function. In Ghosts and Goblins games, you might have had limited continues, but all your progress is lost the second you shut the game off. In Cursed Castille though, every time you beat a chapter it'll save, so if you get through chapters 1 and 2, and find yourself stuck at 3, you can go take a break and shut the game off, and you'll be able to start at the beginning of chapter 3 when you get back. Being able to save your progress really does expand the audience for the game, and opens it up to people who might have otherwise been turned off by the idea of having to beat this brutally difficult game in one sitting. Because don't think for a moment that these quality of life improvements stop from being a challenging game. No. Each stage is filled with sections that act as a endurance test between grueling boss fights. Plus, all 4 different endings for the game are separated by skill. One ending requires you to beat the game without using more than 4 continues, and another requires you to beat the game without using any continues at all, and to complete a small list of objectives too. And if you still need to test yourself, you can compete with other players with a speedrun mode that tracks your time, or you can try to get the highest possible score you can. Trust me, if you're looking for a challenging game, this'll fit the bill just fine. People who are fans of the freeware version in 2012 will find plenty to enjoy in this new release too. There are 2 new weapons, not counting a new secret weapon that's been added to the game. There's also 8 stages now instead of 6. Plus, enemy and item placement has been changed, as well as new secrets added, so fans will actually have to relearn old levels. And the developers also added 10 different viewing modes to the game, such as this, or my favorite one, which makes the game look like you're playing on an old CRT TV. And lastly, this new release has a codex, which you can use to look up monsters or items in the game. Or you can listen to tracks from the soundtrack too. Speaking of the soundtrack, it is absolutely stellar. Not only does it fit the mood for the game, but it and the sound effects have the FM sound of the YM2203 chip that was used in video games throughout the 80s and early 90s, meaning it sounds just like those games that it's inspired by. And the soundtrack was composed by Grizzer87, and you can download it entirely for free from his website, linked below. Visually, the game looks great and would fit in any 80s arcade, especially if you use that CRT TV viewing mode. And the game was inspired by myths from medieval Spain and the rest of Europe, and the art style really does a great job of bringing all those myths to life, particularly if you look at the designs in the codex. Plus, the look of each stage manages to be unique without ever clashing with the overall aesthetic, which is a nice touch. The game really is a blast to play, but if I did have any complaints, I'd say that there are certain sections that to me might have felt a little unfair. For example, there's this part where you have to climb up this tower while avoiding projectiles from wall monsters shooting at you. Vertical mobility ain't the game's strong suit, and it can be somewhat difficult to climb up the tower and avoid getting hit or plunging to your death. There's also a section where you're supposed to jump on top of turtles to avoid falling in the water, also while avoiding hazards. Which is difficult enough, but it's hard to tell where you can actually land on the turtle without falling off. I mean, it looks like I landed right there, but apparently not. Or right there. Again, I fall in even though it looks like I landed. Then there's a section where you have to plunge through all these little spider-like enemies while jumping on platforms, and then you have to navigate a narrow little path filled with turret-like enemies that shoot at you. I mean, I can't imagine making it through without getting hit at least once. Or how about this part where you must narrowly avoid falling gears in this little narrow space as you slowly elevate. There's not a lot of room for error at all. These are just some of the frustrating sections of the game, but what ultimately prevents them from hurting the game too much is the ability to save your progress every time you make it through one of the 8 stages, and the fact that the game is relatively short. It also helps that the game didn't replicate Ghost and Goblin Classic. You have to beat the game twice to actually beat its stunt. I also never found the game unfair to the point where I wanted to stop playing, plus those parts that were frustrating are fairly well paced out, so you're never really going to encounter more than one per stage. Cursed Castille is just $12, and it is worth it. During the Steam Winter Sale right now, you can get it for only $8. You can also go to the developer's site and download the 2012 freeware version of the game. If you're still unsure whether or not this game is your thing or not, you can try it out. I would also recommend downloading some of the developer's other freeware games, such as the Cursed Castille, which plays like Castlevania or Ninja Gaiden on the NES, and is inspired by Greek myths. There's also the shmup Hydora, which is inspired by games like Gradius, R-Type, and Turrican. As an added bonus, these games also have music and sound effects by Grizzer87 too. Seriously, this developer deserves your love, and Cursed Castille deserves to be bought. Go out and get it right now. Well, that's the end of my video. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. If you haven't yet, check out my previous video. You can also check the description, and there's some cool links you can click on. Happy holidays.